everyone. Welcome to Upfront Fridays, the February edition. With me today is Jen Loop, who is the Traverse Area Historical Society Events Chair, and Sharon Jennings, the Traverse Area Historical Society Membership Chair. And we're going to talk today a little bit about upcoming events that you guys have going on, what's going on with the Historical Society, because I get a lot of questions about that still. And hi, I'm your host, Amy Barrett. Thank you so much for joining us today. So, Jen, you're the next program coming up for the Historical Society, and you're going to be talking about a part of our history that had a lot of controversy, but was really a really well-beloved institution in the community, and that was the Clinch Park Zoo.
Absolutely. Yeah, I worked there from 2000 to 2007, so it was always, and that was right up until the zoo closed. And there was certainly controversy when that happened, but it was always my idea to get back to the history of the zoo and really kind of tell that whole story. It started with an aquarium in 1930, so it's been there for a very long time.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So as you've been working on this particular program, you told me that you have reconnected with Doc Ashelman, right?
Doc Ashelman,
So tell us a little bit about Doc.
Well, he was a zookeeper there for 45 years or more, and he was just leaving at the time I started, but he had some great old stories. So one of the coolest things about this project was talking to people, and of course, anecdotal evidence isn't always history, but you can get a lot of information out of these really fantastical things that may or may not have happened exactly as people remember.
Right. And I think, too, with Doc, you're running into a situation where he's as close to the source as you're going to get. We don't have a whole lot of documentation about the park, how it was run, how the animals were taken care of, but Doc himself has a fantastic photograph collection.
Absolutely. His photograph collection, and then there's a collection of Stan Ray, who was the director of the park earlier in the 30s and 40s. As we were talking to Doc, I'm thinking about things that he told us. For example, this never was in the papers because I think most people knew about it at the time, but when the zoo moved from right down by the river at the end of Park Street over across the parkway when the parkway was built, they walked some of the bears over on a leash.
Wow.
Oh, no. Yeah.
That's
because they had been interacting with them and they weren't tame, but they were bears that they could have out. And yeah, he said that there were some that they had to actually crate up and move, but some they just walked right across the parkway.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So people who are coming to the program can expect to learn new things like bears being walked, which is a wild story. Yeah. But you're going to play into nostalgia, right? So you're going to talk about the crow.
Yeah, absolutely. Ace, the crow. And I worked with Ace. She was older than I was when I started working at the zoo.
Wow.
And she lived a nice long life. After the zoo closed, she ended up living with a local veterinarian.
Oh.
Yes, and everyone remembers her. A lot of people claim she would swear. I never heard it myself, but she did have a very large vocabulary, and they're incredibly smart.
Wow.
Yeah, she was a very interesting one. And she was injured, so she couldn't join. That was kind of the idea of the zoo from the beginning.
Really?
It was all orphaned animals who, once they were raised by people or spent too much time around people, they couldn't live on their own. They didn't have the wild skills, or injured. So a lot of the birds had injured wings and that sort of thing.
Right. So we started this off by saying there was a lot of controversy about the zoo. Can you tell us a little bit about the closure? Like, what was the impetus for closing the zoo?
Well, it was actually a time where a lot of zoos around the country were having trouble. Detroit Zoo itself almost went under at almost the same year. So for cities to be in the zoo business was not really, lucrative for them or didn't make a lot of sense. So when you're making cuts, that's one thing. A city zoo is something that might be able to be cut. Also, there was, throughout the history of the zoo, there are concerned citizens about citizens that were concerned about the welfare of animals, which is a wonderful thing to be concerned about. Animals in captivity do need to be well managed, but also you need to worry about their mental health, and that made great strides over the years. We learned more about the science of taking care of different species and what their needs were. So there was always that undercurrent too. People have a lot of opinions on that. People care, which is wonderful.
One of the things that you and I talked about too when you were prepping for this program is you want to find in the community people that may have photographs of a particular type of animal.
Well, we're very much wondering if there was indeed a moose at the zoo. Now, there's some evidence that there was, but moose are incredibly hard to keep in captivity.
Right.
And this would have been early on, 30s, 40s. And there's a little blip about Doc himself said that there was a moose, and he would know the difference between a moose and an elk. Sure. But there was a little blip about a sickly-looking moose that came from Isle Royale, which is entirely possible. But moose really don't survive long, especially in that kind of environment. And I've never seen any photographic evidence. I've only seen a few mentions. Mm-hmm. And so if anyone has anything, even, their own personal collection, because a zoo is a place where people take pictures.
Right.
Anything, a lot of that stuff can be interesting. You can find information even in the background, right? It's
right,
like a smiling kid, and they're like, oh, look, there's the moose.
We are looking for moose
Yeah.
photos. So yeah, please come to that program. Now, that is taking place on Sunday, February 18th from 1 to 3 p.m.
Yeah, I'll be there.
And it's going to be fantastic. Maybe we'll even bring you back, because I think this is going to be an excellent program. And so you are going to be showing photographs that have never been shown publicly before. I mean, this is going to be really stellar, like really some groundbreaking work. So thank you so much for doing this.
Yes.
And it's going to be a lot of fun, because who doesn't remember fondly of the zoo?
Yeah.
So Sharon, you're the membership chair. Let's talk a little bit about the Historical Society in general. So as the membership chair, can you tell us how people can join the Historical Society?
Yes, we're always looking for new members, because we're passionate about keeping the history of Traverse City and the area alive, and we need, people's help to do this. And you can go to our website, which is traversehistory.org, and print out a membership form and send it in. Or we have tours of the cemetery on Sundays in the summer, and you will be able to get a membership form if you go on one of the tours, or downtown tours on Saturday morning, and you can get them there. Or we have programs from September through May, and we will have membership forms there. So yeah, we're always looking for new members to help with this wonderful project.
Right, because there's a lot of history. I mean, even when we're talking about something like the zoo, you're like, oh, it's a history of the zoo, blah. But we have moose, we have miniature cities, we've got a train, we've got, there's so many elements of that history alone. So every single member has some piece of history that they're really an expert on, and that's what the Historical Society is about, is gathering that information, recalling it, bringing it to the fore, making it alive. So
right, and building on what Jenny just said, if anybody out there, I've sort of, because I'm a retired teacher, specialized in the history of education in this area, starting with the one-room schools and then the history of the Traverse City schools. And if anybody has pictures of their classes, of the schools, it would be wonderful. And, if they just bring them to you, Amy, at the library, and you would scan them, it doesn't mean you have to hand over your pictures, but we have files on all of the schools, the one-rooms, the early Traverse City schools, and if you could add to our files, it would be wonderful.
Yeah. So Sharon, you're going to be doing your program on the history of the schools. That takes place on Sunday, March 18th, 1 to 3 o'clock. And then you also have a program scheduled. Julie Shuprai is going to be talking on April 15th about her new book, which is a biography of Jens Petersen, an architect that we're hoping is now going to be world famous because of Julie's book from the Traverse City area. So you guys have a lot going on. The Historical Society is really active and vibrant and thriving. So we're glad you're here, because otherwise, all of this would be lost and going to the dogs, So thank you so much for your hard work.
Oh, you're welcome, Amy.
So all of the programs at the Historical Society, every third Sunday of the month, September through May. They take place at the Traverse Area the Traverse Area District Library in the McGuire Room, 1 to 3 p.m.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us today, guys. And and go Historical Society.
Up North TV Channel 189 is your connection to community events and ideas you won't find anywhere else.
signed that card. You want to play it out?
We had a pool, and my mom always had lots of great.
Up North TV, your community connection in Northern Michigan.
Welcome back to Upfront Fridays. My name's Amy, I'm your host, and with me today is Yvonne Stevens, who is a poet. We love poets, and we love pushing books. So thank you so much for joining us this morning.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, an honor. Well, we try, because the whole point is we want to encourage you in your art, and we want to make your art available to other people to inspire and inform and whatever agenda you're pushing. So thank you so much for coming.
I feel supported. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So your debut collection of poetry just came out, The Salt Before It Shakes. Isn't that a great title? That's such a good title. So
Thank
how
you.
fun. And I've read about 7 or 8 of the poems yet, so I have a lot of poetry left to read. How many poems do you have in this collection?
There's 24 in this collection,
Cool.
and it's a chapbook, which is it's smaller than a full-length collection, and hopefully at some point I'll have one of those.
Yeah. Well, this is a good place to start. You have been published too, so this is your debut collection, but you've been published before in other places.
Yes,
too.
I've been published in the Dunes Review and other wonderful publications, and it's been a wonderful journey to have that kind of support along the way, and then have this manuscript made into a book. And
So, how long have you been a poet?
I've been a poet, I would say, since I was in my 20s. So I'm 37 now, and that's mental math that I'm not great at. but I started writing and reading as a young child, and I wasn't able to express myself verbally very well at a young age, and so it became my natural outlet, writing in a journal or letters eventually. And so, but then when I was in college, I gravitated towards creative writing, and then poetry just seemed like a great fit for my ability to distill language down to the shorter form and try to have an emotional impact in this crafted words on the page. And so it's what I feel like I'm called to write, even though I'm able to write other kinds of styles of writing. It's poetry. I'm a poet.
Nice. That's nice to hear a poet own it, because sometimes they're like, well, I dabble in poetry because I write in other forms and yada yada. But to hear a poet be on it, that's amazing.
It took some years to get there, but some things passed in my life, and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm a poet. I'm gonna own it.
Right. So what do you write about? What informs your poetry?
In this collection, a lot of the poems are about my journey to become a mother, and also I write a lot about I use a lot of imagery that is from nature in the woods, but also I write about my body and different things through the years that have happened with my health, and learning to accept my body as it is. And yeah, what I feel like informs my writing is my personal experience of the world, and then just trying to make sense of that, or if something seems really crappy. Sorry, I can't say that is in my life. It's like,
Right.
but how can I turn this around? How can I look at this in a new way, or see it in a truer way than the way I might be feeling about it in this temporary moment? So.
Yeah. One of your poems in particular that I read, As a Dignity, I'm not going to give it away, but it's a real gut punch at the end. And it was just, I did not expect the last line in particular. So I can tell you've been crafting these stories for a while. And that particular story is not one that I don't think, you're right, you're trying to find the truth in that particular instance. What happens is your grandfather unexpectedly, is the impression I get, passes away. And how do you accept that? How do you overcome that? So I really enjoyed that particular one. But you said you wanted to read one for us today. So
Yes, and I actually have one memorized that
oh wow,
I'll turn to the page just because it's helpful for my nerves to have it in front of me. Oh, there it is. Okay, Taking in the Sun. Cut into the sunlit up top of the river with my canoe oar, sliced out as big a piece as I could get, slid it into the basket at my hip like a fish. Took my chunk of sun home, put it in a jar with some yeast. The yeast fed on the sweetness of the sun. Fished out the glowing spheres of carbonation with a spoon, as many as I could get, lined them up around the base of my neck, and wore the sun.
that's so, like, wow. There's a lot of imagery going on there, and in my head it was just nothing but colors. So what a beautiful piece. Thank you. So what is that about? What's going on there?
I struggle with the lack of sunshine during the wintertime, and so it was an ode to the sun and how I feel about it when it returns. I do love the winter for the things that are great about it, but right about this time of year, I think we all start to feel like ready for a little bit of a change and watching for those subtle signs. And so just feeling like I wish I could take this chunk of sun home with me and feel this way that I feel in this moment. Wish I could have more control. Call it up.
So poetry, as much as, poets, seems to be a very solitary activity, but you seem to have a pretty strong support system around you. In your blog, you talked about how your husband's always your first reader. So you've got a husband and 2 kids that really inform a lot of this poetry. So my question there would be, is that nerve-wracking to have your husband as your first go-to, and is he good at his job?
So he's a great sport. So when we first were getting to know each other, and I would share poetry with him, my poems and others, he had a little bit of a hesitation about it. And I feel like this is true, and I'm speaking in generalizations, but there's maybe it's more prevalent that people are hesitant about poetry, or just not quite sure how to approach it, or like, I just never understand those poems, or why don't they rhyme? Again, I'm speaking in generalizations, but just that getting to grow as a pair of being a poet, and he's my first reader, has been quite a journey. And now he feels more confident in his feedback that he's able to give, and so it's not nerve-wracking. There was a point in my life when sharing my poems was very nerve-wracking,
Really?
but now I feel like it's part of the process to get these poems out into the world, which now feels like I need to do that. I need to share my poems with people, because just hearing your feedback today and hearing from other readers has been so powerful. So just the life that these poems take on outside of my own little world.
Yeah. So, speaking of sharing, let's talk about how people can discover you. So you have a blog. Give us that URL.
Yep, the blog is called Poet with 40 Eyes, and it's poetwith40eyes.com.
Right, so it's poet with 40
Yep.
eyes.com.
Poetwith40eyes.com.
So you have things up there. There's also information about where to get your book on there. But we do want to push our local retailers,
Yes.
Horizon Books. our
Horizon
host.
Books has my book, and I'm here tomorrow Saturday the 17th for a signing from 2 to 4 p.m.
Right. Saturday, February 17th, 2 to 4 p.m. at Horizon Books on Front Street in Traverse City. So it's so exciting to have you here. Thank you so much for coming on today. This is a beautiful collection of poetry. I hope you're very proud. You should be, because it is fantastic. And you've already told us why people should be reading it. People should be reading it because they want to connect with their bodies themselves. And that seems to be what you're about. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Up North TV, Channel 189 is your connection to community events and ideas you won't find anywhere else.
When I express something, they like me.
Margaret here, and it's so important to learn those laws. I signed that card.
We had a pool, and my mom always had lots of great.
Up North TV, your community connection in Northern Michigan.